November 7th is coming up, and with that, our city elections are happening, and there's lots of different things that are going to be voted on. Some city council member seats, the mayor, although she has an opponent, it is a write-in ballot election for the opponent, and so it'll be interesting to see how all this works out. But really, what this channel is doing is trying to bring in information. So we talked to you guys about what's happening, what's going on, city council and developments under review, and then bringing information so that you can make informed decisions, such as on the November ballot, and get involved, because ultimately I think we're only seeing 30 to 40,000 people turn out to vote. And what that ultimately does is these huge decisions on a national basis. It's extremely important to get involved, but really where you're going to see the biggest differences is local. So especially to your wallets, one of the things that we're talking about is a half-cent sales tax is being proposed to go towards a budget deficit of about $40 to $46 million annually, that will go to fund parks and rec, transit, and air pollution, which we'll talk about a little bit later with the utilities. So these are things that are going to immediately impact your cost of living, but also the quality of life in Fort Collins. So if you're pro that half-cent tax to fund the parks and recreation, which we had Mark Calhoun on our Fort Collins Fellas podcast. If you haven't listened to that, he does suggest that there are some definite things that need funding, some maintenance, deferred maintenance, some aging parks, new parks, and things of that nature, which makes Fort Collins so great. We are a community that has amazing outdoor recreations, parks, trails, paved paths. We just released a video, about some of the paved trails that I rode on, and showed videos, drone videos, GoPro videos, and all of those things definitely cost money. And I was just listening to the city council work session, and Jenny Arndt suggested that yes, our budgetary expenses just seem to keep increasing, and our revenue with that has to increase to maintain those expenses. So that being said, we'll jump in again. That budget, that half-cent sales tax is going to be on the budget. There's 3 charter amendments that essentially dictate how the city of Fort Collins acts and behaves. The first one is to allow certain types of felons, to run for public office. This aligns with the Colorado law and essentially removes Fort Collins, Fort Collins' liability of potentially of being sued to not follow that. Aurora was sued and lost that case. So it seems like it was a very quick vote for city council to put that onto the ballot. So that'll be up to you. The Amendment 2 will clarify some language for petitions. So the Land Development Code change that was petitioned and then subsequently repealed by the city council. I guess there's some clarifying language that needs to go on there, some duplicate language that will need to be clarified. So again, we're actually going to be voting on a second reading on the land use code next Tuesday, which then will have its 10-day period to get the petition signatures, from my understanding, and either go into full effect or potentially be repealed again and maybe go onto the ballot. So who knows? But that will all be clarified in that amendment, Charter Amendment 2. And then the third amendment will give city council authority to set residency requirements for city department directors. So not city council members or the mayor or mayor pro tem. Those are district situated locations. You have to live within that district to be a council member for that district. But if you are a city manager or a city staff, you do not have to live within a city director. You do not have to live within the city to be able to apply for that job. And a lot of that's, cost of living and basically the affordability factor allow people to live outside the city, work within the city, not necessarily a city council member or a mayor. Let's see here. A couple other things that have happened is Larimer County Landfill. I was just out there earlier this week, and man, it is definitely full, and I can't imagine living near that. But there are plenty of people who do. It is coming at its capacity and will soon start the build out and operation of the new landfill that will be north of Wellington. But there was a fallout between Republic Services, which used to be Gallegos, which was going to take over the cost to operate, build out, and that is no longer happening. So Larimer County will be taking on that $25 million price tag to build out that Larimer County landfill. Additionally, the Albertsons on the north side, the city submitted an LOI to the owner of that to purchase that property and no longer hopefully be a blight on that North College Avenue. North College is gorgeous. If you guys haven't been out there lately, shoot, when I was growing up, that area, not even that long ago, actually when I was in college, that area was just that street, road, everything about it was pretty rough, just kind of falling apart. And now it's just the medians are gorgeous, curbs, sidewalks. It just really looks nice. And you've got the King Supers out there. You've got some a lot of new developments being proposed. And City of Fort Collins is offering to buy or is submitted an LOI to buy that Albertsons and surrounding buildings. And we'll see where that goes, whether it's affordable housing, a kind of a community, place to hang out, do things, but it will not be vacant, hopefully much longer. That place has been vacant forever. Albertsons actually has a lease until 2030. So it'll be interesting to see how that all works out, what ultimately goes there and when. All righty. So let's see here. Some things that are happening coming up. If you haven't been out to Bartle's Pumpkin Patch, definitely check that out. We're actually going to go check out Anderson Farm this year for our pumpkin gathering. It was awesome. We went out there and picked up some sunflowers earlier, but lots of different places that you can go around town. And as quick as Halloween is coming up, you only have a couple weekends left. Probably pumpkin picking is slimmed down to not necessarily the cream of the crop per se, but other than that, we also talked with a client that is coming into town November or first week of November. November 3rd is the lighting ceremony. So definitely, if you haven't, go check that out. The city lights turn on from November 3rd until Valentine's Day. It is a postcard. It is gorgeous. City of Fort Collins does an amazing job. Downtown Development Authority, which we were actually having Matt Robinault, the director of the DDA, on the Fort Collins Fellows podcast. So pay attention. Stay tuned to that. And we also have the Spring 44 podcast, Jeff Lindauer, coming out live next week. So if you haven't had a drink or been to social and had a gin and tonic, Spring 44 gin and tonic, that founder is going to be on the podcast. So lots of cool things going on. Make sure you're paying attention, listening. But again, one of the big things that we do this this show for is the reason we started was to talk about city council and things that kind of go under the radar, but are very available to the citizens of Fort Collins or anybody who wants to watch. And it was a 4-hour city council work session, which we're going to break down into about a minute and a half, because a lot of it, not going to lie, hey, I'm not going to blow smoke at you and say that I know everything, but a lot of it was above my head. But the three things that they were talking about were utilities, getting to net carbon neutral, trees, soil, and landscaping, zeroscaping, those codes going into the land use code. And then finally, they talked about the East Mulberry annexation, which, if you come through Fort Collins, there's kind of these main arteries coming through. There's the Windsor exit, which is what I take, Harmony, Prospect, and then Mulberry. And Mulberry is definitely not the prettiest gateway into Fort Collins. And one of Fort Collins' definite considerations is making that pretty. But that being said, let's jump in to some of the things. City of Fort Collins has a goal of 50% below 2005 carbon emissions by 2026, 80% below 2005 by 2030, and carbon neutral by 2050. And the amount of information that was going on there and the amount of, utilities are just nuts. They're crazy. I mean, on arbitrage for minute by minute cost of buying energy from one of the 14 different area states and utility providers and major utility providers, and then selling it to a customer, whether and how all that works is just amazing to think about. And people are literally like pulling levers. And that was a big conversation they had as, solar, wind, hydro, gas, coal. Those are all our big suppliers of energy and utility. And City of Fort Collins is definitely one of the vanguard cities trying to go towards net carbon neutral and have an aggressive plan. And it seems like maybe we won't necessarily get to those goals. We have a lot of different technology that has to come into place, like battery storage. Right now, it's like a 2 to 4 hour battery that you can put on your house, but there's companies that are trying to create 8-hour batteries and 100-hour batteries, so that if you do happen to have a sunny, bright day that's very windy, you can attract and maintain that energy. And then when it's what they call a dark night, calm winds, be able to power your house for the next 5 days. So there's lots of different technology that has to happen for these goals to be able to come into play. And then there also got to be some citizen interaction, because citizens are creating power and putting it back on the grid. And sometimes that's not a good thing, because, well, maybe the grid doesn't need it at that time because of supply demand issues. So much information. All of that being said, City of Fort Collins is actively working towards some amazing goals to provide clean energy that throughout Fort Collins, hopefully address a lot of different ozone issues and things of that nature, where the air quality, air pollution in Fort Collins, that's probably one of the things that we talk about in our pros and cons videos. But I would say we are hitting it head on, and very cool things happening. A lot of them way above my pay grade. But all that being said, we are working towards those, and it's great to see that come to be. That being said, trees, Zeroscape, and soil. So Fort Collins has an amazing tree canopy, and new developers aren't necessarily incentivized to keep some of these, old mature trees. And what the city wants to do is put in incentivized an appreciation plan of these trees, because they're basically paying the same cost for a sapling versus a 50-year-old tree. And some of these trees weren't necessarily protected, so they want to be able to provide protections for some of these trees, provide a better dollar value for these trees for these developers to keep. And then the Zeroscape, they were talking about like 75 million gallons a year if they were to pass these codes to allow for xeriscaping and drought resistant plants. Now, not necessarily within Fort Collins proper or the City of Fort Collins utility, I should say, but that equates to about 950 households worth of water each year being saved if these plans get put into place. And then soil erosion, soil compaction. We have expanding soils. They're just talking about some of these different things for the land use code. Again, if you are a developer, these are all things that are going to potentially impact you, but definitely cool to see about the tree canopy in Fort Collins. It's one of the greatest things that you drive through Fort Collins right now, especially with all the changing leaves. We have an amazing tree canopy, very little power lines throughout. So it is beautiful to see. Then finally, the East Mulberry annexation at first reading for this overarching plan. Now, essentially, this is not really a plan to annex anything from East Mulberry, but what it is a plan that suggests here are some breakpoints, some waterfall effects that will allow City of Fort Collins to annex these locations and provide police, to provide Fort Collins connections, not necessarily provide streets and gutters, because that's what I thought originally, but essentially those are all going to maintain. But it will provide a kind of a general plan that they can vote on and say, this is what our goals are. And then from there, dial it in. But that first reading will be on November 21st and moving on from there. All right. So that is it for tonight. It's my wife's Janae, her birthday. We're going to go grab some dinner. 13 minutes and 40 seconds. I'm calling it early. Thank you for joining me every Thursday, 5:30. If you are interested in more information, never hesitate to call, reach out, text, or comment below. Take care. Bye.